tariffs on Russian fertilizer is Vicky Price in London. She's a board member of the Centre for Economics and Business Research. Welcome back, Vicky. Now, the EU says these tariffs on Russian fertilizers are about weakening Moscow's war economy, but could this backfire by driving up European food production costs?
Well, we have to remember that, of course, problems with fertilizers and coming into the EU have been around for some time. They were there at the beginning of the war with the Ukraine, when, of course, there was a blockage of anything coming out of Ukraine for a while. But it is absolutely true that Russia and the Ukraine together account for a very large percentage of fertilizer production and therefore exports traditionally to the EU and others. But yes, there has already been, we've had a series of sanctions against Russia. There have been 17 sanctions already, and there will be more. And I think this latest one, which is attacking the areas that really matter for Russia, is really what the EU thinks is going to make a difference. But yes, you're right. Prices could go up, and it is an issue, and farmers will be concerned. But there's already been a bit of diversion taking place, and obviously the EU must have estimated that it can withstand any price increase that may come.
And more than 25% of EU fertilizer currently comes from Russia. Will these sanctions hurt European farmers more than Russia itself?
This is always the concern, that in fact the cost comes to those which impose a certain extra tariff on whatever comes in. We've seen that in the US, and that's why everyone is worried about the implication of tariffs in terms of prices and how they might affect various sectors in the US. But yes, I think there is no doubt there is going to be an issue. But of course, as we all know, because of everything that's happening in terms of the type of production that is taking place in across the world, really, in farming, what we've seen is a move away from traditional fertilizers to more greener alternatives, and that perhaps may cushion a little bit of the cost that may come onto farmers in Europe. The other question is, of course, how long it lasts. But obviously, if there is a resolution of the conflict, then a lot of that will ease again. And we do know that there are parts of Europe politically who have been asking for, in fact, if anything, a reduction in some of those trade sanctions that exist. So, it may not last very long, but I think the EU is showing the determination that it wants to be much more involved in trying to get the whole conflict resolved.
And farmers are already protesting. Do you think the EU can justify the economic sacrifices for this policy demand?
I think what the EU would like to see is a long-term solution that perhaps helps everybody, and that solution can only really come, it is obviously assuming if the war ends and then there is a free flow of those goods, because we have all realized how important Russia is, alongside, of course, the Ukraine, in supplying a whole range of agricultural products to the rest of the world. And the sooner that ends, of course, the better it is. But yes, there is undoubtedly going to be pain whenever you put sanctions on a country on which, from which, if you like, you depended hugely in terms of the types of imports that affect particular sectors. So yes, there's bound to be an impact on this. How long lasting it is, I think, is what the EU is wondering about right now.
And do you think we could be heading towards a new wave of food inflation across the European Union at the moment?
Well, the interesting thing is, if you look at what's been going on with food, there are some items which have been going up again. I mean, after a period of food coming down, then we seem to have reached a bit of a plateau right now. We've had some bad harvests, of course, and also some of the imports into the EU have gone up in price in various areas. But then again, things improved a little bit over the last few months. So with a bit of luck, this year isn't going to be as bad as it was last year. But obviously, if you are imposing extra costs in various areas for anything that comes in, then that is bound to have an impact, and bound eventually to have an impact indirectly on the price the consumer is paying. But yes, we are seeing a bit of an upturn in products costs, particularly dairy, just recently. But even if you compare that, where we are now to where we were after the invasion in 2022, we still have a long way to go. There is a big decline that has been taking place over the period, for which, of course, as consumers, we're all grateful.
Right, and we will have to leave it there. Vicky Price in London, thank you very much, as always. Southeast Asian leaders are meeting in Kuala Lumpur for their first summit since Donald Trump's tariff policies shook the world. Malaysia's Prime Minister, this year's ASEAN chair, said he has written to US President Trump to organize a meeting between Washington and ASEAN nations. Efforts are also being geared towards increasing pressure on Myanmar's military junta to hold talks with the armed opposition. The country has been in turmoil since its military overthrew the elected civilian government. Also topping the agenda is East Timor's application to join the bloc.
Quiet engagement matters, and it is small, and the breach may be fragile, but as they say, that's for peace. Even a fragile breach is better than a widening gap. I strongly believe in the fortitude and staying power of ASEAN to withstand the headwinds and weather the storms of the challenges and uncertainties facing us.
As global trade grows more uncertain, AI is becoming the tool businesses lean on for survival. Whether it's chip makers adapting to sanctions or companies navigating tariffs, artificial intelligence is now a frontline economic strategy. For example, NVIDIA plans to launch a new AI chip in China priced between $6,500 and $8,000, down from their previous H20 model, which costs around $12,000. That's about 45% cheaper. The company aims to maintain its position in the $50 billion Chinese data center market. The move follows $5.5 billion in write-offs and $15 billion in lost sales due to US bans and recent tariffs. With $3.3 trillion in US imports last year, shifting tariffs are forcing rapid adjustments. Salesforce's AI agent now handles 20,000 product categories instantly, replacing human customs teams. It uses the 4,400-page tariff rulebook to help businesses respond in real time. And firms like Canada's Kinaxis are using AI to stimulate tariff workarounds. By analysing materials and external data, AI recommends cheaper substitutes for high tariff parts. The result, faster decisions and fewer losses across global supply chains. For more on this, we're joined by Professor Dennis-Kenji Kipker in Frankfurt, Germany. He's a research director at Cyber Intelligence Institute. Welcome back, Dennis. Now, tell us more about how AI is transforming global supply chains under these tariff pressures.
Yeah, so in some way, AI is revolutionizing global supply chains by enabling businesses to navigate tariff pressures with enhanced agility and also precision. And through methods of predictive analysis, AI can forecast, for example, demand changes, identify potential geopolitical conflicts, and also possibly assess the impact of tariffs on various supply chain scenarios, allowing companies to quickly evaluate possibly also alternative suppliers, optimize logistics, and also adjust sourcing strategies.
Now, what does NVIDIA's price cut tell us about US-China tech dynamics at the moment?
Yeah, so definitely it is to say that NVIDIA's price drop, particularly linked to US export controls, as we have seen in the past, on advanced AI chips to China, clearly illustrates the significant economic impact of these restrictions on American tech companies. And it also signals that while the US aims to curb China's technological advancement, it comes at the direct cost to leading American firms losing access to a very crucial market, pushing China to accelerate its own domestic chip development and potentially also fostering self-sufficiency.
So do you think US export controls are backfiring economically?
At the moment, this is not very clear to be said, but the economic impact of US export controls on China is very complex and presents a mixed picture at the moment. So while these controls aim to limit China's access to advanced technologies, they can indeed backfire economically in some way for US companies by restricting the market access and revenue streams. And additionally, they incentive China to ramp up its domestic production and development, innovation in AI technology in targeted sectors, potentially also leading to long-term technological independence of China that could further diminish future opportunities for US firms and also reshape possibly global supply chains in high tech.
Professor Dennis-Kenji Kipker in Frankfurt, thank you very much for joining us.